right, good afternoon. This is Linda Drake. I'm the State Board of Education staff person for the Mastery-Based Learning Work Group in Washington. And this is the first of a pair of webinars on mastery-based learning in higher education in Washington. These webinars are in support of the work group. And the work group has been charged by the legislature to inform the governor, the legislature, and the public about barriers to mastery-based learning in Washington in K-12 education, and about opportunities to increase K-12 student access to mastery-based academic pathways aligned to their personal career goals and post-secondary education. So we're going to record this webinar today, and you know, not all of our work group members were able to join us in person today, but we will have it available for folks to look at over the next couple of weeks. And then at our next Mastery-Based Learning Work Group meeting, we'll be able to discuss and reflect on these webinars. So some of the best models for mastery-based learning are in higher education, and while there are major differences between K-12 and higher ed systems, there may be much that could cross over and much that could be learned, and that's why we're hearing from some experts in competency or mastery-based learning in higher education through these webinars and at our next meeting. So I'd encourage work group members to think about what might be applicable to K-12, and there'll be time at our next meeting to debrief. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tonya Drake, who is the Chancellor for Western Governors University, Washington, and the Regional Vice President for WGU. So take it away, Tonya.
Thank you so much, Linda, and I appreciate your last name. No relation at all, but we just really greatly appreciate you including us in this dialogue. As you know, Washington has been a state affiliate for over 8 years, going on 9 years this year, and we've grown from about 1,000 students to serving over 12,000 students in Washington. We do competency-based education, and like you said, that there are some similarities yet differences. And so we're excited to share what we know and what we've learned and how it may be applicable to K-12. I will say the expert in our area is Stacey Ludwig Johnson, who we've invited. She is our vice president over Teachers College and would be probably the most influential as far as being able to address some of the questions that you and the committee had posed. And so I just want to do an introduction of Stacey and then also let you know that I have some staff on board in case there's some local questions for Washington. My staff includes Constance Crunlin and Jake Rydell. They're on the phone as well. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stacey.
Thank you very much. I just want to ensure everyone can hear me okay.
We can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. So I've had the privilege of working with Western Governors University for 21 years. So I've really sort of been here since the very beginning and had the privilege of enrolling the first 2 students at the university. And as Tonya mentioned, I'm the VP of Operations of our Teachers College. I spent most of my tenure here at WGU supporting our student support services and academic services, and then moved to the operations role about 2 years ago. So just to give you a bit of a sense of my background and the perspective that I'll be bringing to the conversation today. So I'm going to essentially utilize the guiding questions that we have here in front of us, and that'll help me stay on track. Please, at any point, if you have questions or if you would like me to provide additional information, don't hesitate to jump in. I'll try to leave time at the end here for questions and answers as well. So the very first thing that I think is useful is that WGU is competency-based education model. Our faculty model at WGU is unique in that we have essentially unbundled the more traditional faculty model. So we have students who, as soon as they enroll at the university, they are connected and partnered with what we call a program mentor. A program mentor is the faculty member who truly understands sort of the overall student arc of the student experience for that student's particular program. And in the case of Teachers College, like our other colleges at the university, your program mentor is going to have a background or professional experience in the field that you're preparing for. So if you would like to be a licensed elementary education teacher, then we will pair you with a program mentor who has been an elementary education teacher, so that you have that opportunity to build a nice connection with someone who has had similar experiences and can sort of guide you professionally, as well as support you as you move through your program. A program mentor stays connected or partnered with a student from enrollment all the way to graduation. And they connect with students weekly or bi-weekly, depending on the needs of the student as the student is moving through the program. And they do most of those connections synchronously by phone calls or web conferences. So that program mentor is a very key component to the student experience at WGU. A second key component is what we call our course instructors. So students move through our model in a way in which they have a 6-month term. And so students start on the first day of essentially every month, but as an individual student. If you start on, say, January 1st, then you will end your term January, February, March, April, May, June on June 30th, and that will be your 6-month term. During that 6-month term, you will communicate and connect with course instructors. Course instructors are the faculty that support each of our courses, and they're the content experts for those courses. So students during any given 6-month term, they have their weekly or bi-weekly conversations with their program mentor, and then they're connecting as often as needed with their course instructor as well. And typically, particularly if they're working through content that they may find challenging, that may be weekly interactions with the course instructor, or if it's content where the student is moving through at a pace where the technology is sort of facilitating the learning, and there's sort of required less connection, then the student and the course instructor will meet just as often as needed as the student is moving through the particular courses in that student's term. We also have another set of important faculty in our model, and those are our evaluators. Evaluators are the individuals who evaluate our assessments. Our evaluators are, they sit behind, I'll call it sort of a, we utilize an assessment for our performance assessments, a tool, a platform that we call Emma. So our evaluators are trained, and they are trained to evaluate performance assessment tasks that are submitted. They pick those tasks up on the other side of that platform, evaluate those tasks against a rubric, and provide substantive feedback to the student. They never connect or provide instruction to the student in terms of actual course content. Their sole responsibility is to evaluate the work, which allows for valid and reliable assessment of that work, as well as consistency across all of the different student submissions. So an evaluator may be trained to evaluate a certain number of tasks, for instance, for a particular course. Our program mentors and our course instructors are full-time faculty members at the university, and our assessment evaluators are typically part-time faculty that work for the university. So those are the sort of student-facing faculty members that work with students. We also have support centers. We have a writing center and a math center and a career services center and a student support or student success center that also supports students throughout their journey. In the case of WGU Teachers College, we also have a field experience team that supports students while they go out and do their on-the-ground demonstration teaching or student teaching in the classroom. And that is a very special team that supports locating and placing students in those classrooms and then providing support while the student is actually doing the demonstration teaching. And then we have clinical supervisors who provide evaluations of that work on the ground. And that culminates in a final teacher work sample or EdTPA, depending on the state. So our students are supported, again, throughout their entire arc by teams who are specialized around the content that they're providing support. Are there any questions about that? Okay, so one of the questions that we have in front of us is how do students receive instructions? So I've sort of provided that overview at this point in terms of program mentors and course instructors. Students can pace through their courses at a pace that is personalized. And so students within a 6-month term, we expect students to attend full-time. So as an undergraduate student, that's at least 12 competency units. And so students can, in terms of pacing through their courses in any 6-month term, some courses, depending on the level of competence that they're bringing to the table, or maybe the competence with that particular content, they may move through some courses more quickly than others and are able to demonstrate mastery of those competencies on our assessments. Some courses may take a bit longer during that 6-month term, so students are able to sort of move through at their own pace. So course instructors, as they are supporting students at any given time, since our courses are not time-based or seat time-based, it's very individualized in terms of students are moving in and out of the courses. And so a course instructor at any given time may be working with a student who is approaching the content in this particular course for the very first time. And in the same day, they may be supporting a student who is very near to taking the competency assessment or has been engaged in the content for a longer period of time. And so when you think of our courses, you sort of think of them as open entry, open exit. So they're not time-based or time-bounded. Students are moving through that content as needed based on the level of support that's required, the level of competencies that they're bringing to the table. Are there any questions about that?
Hi, this is Linda. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
First, what does the actual course look like? It sounds like it's an online curriculum so they don't have much sort of direct instruction or real-time instruction. It's all sort of pre-recorded, and they work online and then connect with the course instructor for any personalized work they need. Is that?
Actually, the courses are going to have multiple components. So when you're moving into a course as a student, there's going to be multiple options and opportunities to connect with a faculty member synchronously and asynchronously. So our faculty members support, of course, one-on-one connection with students, and they will reach out to a student immediately as students enroll and make that connection and help the students set up an individualized plan for path through that particular course. And students can attend up to daily live webinars with course instructors. Most of our courses are supported by a team of course instructors. And so there's a full schedule of synchronous activities or webinars where students can engage with a group and one or more course instructors for that particular course. And then of course they're accessing the content of the course online as well. So we believe very strongly that sort of one-on-one connection is very important, and we're finding particularly with our population of students who are oftentimes first generation, and it's been a number of years since they've attended a college course, that really providing the one-on-one support ensures that they're able to stay on track, and it ensures that we know what level of support they need. So we actively encourage that participation in the live events as well as engaging in the course content online.
And what is the sort of the student load of a typical course instructor?
That's a great question, and it depends. In the Teachers College, if we have content that's particularly challenging, or let's say, for instance, a student is working through perhaps during demonstration teaching and they're attending a cohort seminar. A cohort seminar will be anywhere from 10 to 15 students, and that's the load for that particular instructor or faculty member because they're supporting the student through that very hands-on portion of their program. Some courses that are the content's relatively easy, a course instructor may have a load of 100 students, and in other courses where the content is particularly challenging, their loads may be 30 to 50 students. So it absolutely depends on the rigor of the content as well as the profile of students that are being served. And also you have to bear in mind that many of our courses have a team of course instructors, and so course instructors will take turns being available so students can pick up the phone and call, almost like a helpline if they're stuck. And we try to do that extended hours and weekends as well. So even as a course instructor, you're supporting your load of students who you're directly responsible for, but also taking turns sort of being available so that we can get a wider range of support for students. If they get stuck, someone's there to pick up the phone and answer the call, or emails may come in, and if their individual course instructor isn't available, it goes into sort of a team mailbox so that students don't have to go hours or days without instructor support. So I know that's kind of a gray answer to the question, but it truly does just depend on the content and what we know is required for students to be successful in those particular courses.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Tonya, do you have anything that you would like to add to the model? Okay. I'll go ahead and move on. One of the questions that is here, which I think is very interesting, which is what are some of the challenges that students have to adjusting to this particular model of education? What we find with our students, and bear in mind, our students are adult learners, sort of average age, at least in WGU Teachers College, around 35 to 37. And most of our students are bringing 2 to 3 prior college transcripts, but no degree, at least into our initial licensure programs. So most of the students have had an experience with a traditional model that is, you know, more sort of seat time bound. So I think in our model, one of the things that that we have to sort of orient students to right away is the approach about this being a 6-month term, and that they, along with their program mentor, are responsible for developing that individualized plan to move through a 6-month term. And so that gives the learner a great deal of responsibility in terms of how they want to manage you know, sort of moving through that course load in a term. And that's very new for many learners, because they're more, you know, their experience has been, you know, show up to class every week at a certain time and submit assignments as you go. And we really, you know, we have a more of an individualized approach. And so that takes some getting used to as students are moving through. So particularly our adult learners who have been out of college, or have, it's been a number of years since they've had an experience, and they have to sort of learn. I think the other thing that we have found is they have to learn how to study again, and how to sort of set up a space in their home where they can dedicate the time and the effort and the energy to doing their studies, since they, you know, they're doing the work online. And that's another real opportunity for our students, is sort of thinking about how you're going to carve out, say, 20 hours a week, and who's going to support watching the kids and all of the other things that you would normally do during those 20 hours, so that you can focus your energy on really learning the content and the competencies. So those are a couple of the different things that our students struggle with. I think too, they have to learn how to utilize the technology and how to engage, you know, synchronously and asynchronously, and how to use the tools. And so we spend a great deal of time orienting our students to the model and the tools available, to try to make that sort of bridge that experience from whatever prior experience they've had. There's another question here about, is this a model that suits all students, most students, or some students? So that's a really interesting question. And our goal is that this is a model that suits all students, because in terms of really providing access to education, this is really a really great model, because it does allow for the individualized path. It does allow students to slow down when they need to, and to accelerate when they can. And so the way that we approach it at WGU is really, it's a model that's accessible to everyone, and it's really how we meet the students exactly where they're at, and how do we provide that sort of individualized support that they may need, again, depending on where they're at as they're moving through their program. And that's really our goal, is that it works for everyone. Certainly as students are moving at their own speed, it really does accommodate sort of differing levels of time that they can spend on their studies, or you know, comfort with content or competencies in a certain area, etc. And then we rely on our other sort of supplemental services like Writing Center and Math Center and whatnot, to provide an additional layer of support for students who may need additional support as they're moving through particular content. And me personally, when I think about how my thinking about sort of competency-based education has evolved over the number of years that I've been at WGU, is, you know, I think when we first started to build a competency-based model, we were really thinking about it from the point of sort of the academic sort of aptitude or competence that our learners would bring to the table. And what we're learning is that that's important, but what's equally as important is sort of the non-cognitive skills. So the growth mindset, sort of the grit and the resilience, you know, can can this particular student or learner, when the going gets tough, how do we help them stay on track and move through whatever that challenge happens to be. So I think for me and for our Teachers College, we're really focused on embedding the social emotional learning and really trying to create that sort of that growth mindset and building up a student's expectation that they can do this, because so many of our students are coming to us and they haven't been as successful as they like to have been in prior experiences, and so we're sort of lifting them up and providing that individualized support. So I think for me, that's been one area that we're really recognizing deserves a great more time and support, particularly as we're orienting students and connecting them with program mentors as they're moving through our programs. I'm going to stop here for a second and see if there's any questions, or if Constance or Jake would like to add anything to the conversation at this point.
Well, Stacey, thank you for the opportunity. All I want to point out briefly is that Dr. Drake did have to drop off the call. So Tonya,
Okay.
I don't want anybody to think that she's ignoring you.
Okay. No problem. Thank you. All right. So if there,
quick question here.
Sure.
Well, actually, I'm not sure it's so quick, but could you talk a little bit about funding and tuition? How do you validate satisfactory progress that student is a full-time student?
That is a great question, and I've worked with that for many, many years. So in our model, so way back when I joined WGU in 1998, we were one of the first participants in the distance demonstration project, where we were really focused on how to provide online education to students. And we entered not only in an online sort of delivery model, but with competency-based education as well. So the way that we measure satisfactory academic progress is that we've identified a competency unit. One competency unit is equivalent to 1 semester credit of learning. So when we say that our students are going to complete 12 competency units in a term, that would be, that would equate to, in a traditional model, 12 credit hours, essentially. So we've had to sort of be able to draw that line so that we can measure what our students enroll in at the beginning of the term, and whether or not they've completed that full-time sort of equivalent in competencies. Now, we have an algorithm that we use to determine for each of our courses the number of competency units that are assigned, and we utilize Bloom's taxonomy to do that. And that would be a whole nother conversation, but as students are moving through, like you may have, at any given time, you might have a course that is worth 2 competency units, and another course that's worth 3, 4, or 5 competency units, again, depending on sort of how the algorithm has been applied to that particular course in terms of the competency unit definition and how it's applied. So in many ways, we're similar in terms of needing to come up with that sort of methodology so that we could track progress for Title IV aid. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, what professional development do you provide to your faculty to transition from traditional to online? So when we're talking about faculty here, I'm assuming you're talking about our program mentors and course instructors, for instance, that are supporting students through our model. So our faculty, actually, as they join WGU, also go through a competency-based approach to faculty onboarding. So, and it's sort of individualized as well. So when our faculty members first start at WGU, they spend sort of the first 1 or 2 days with their manager as well as a peer coach that they'll be working with as they're moving through their onboarding process. And the onboarding process takes roughly 20 days, but since it's competency-based, it could take a little bit longer, or our faculty could move it through it a bit more quickly, but 20 days seems to be sort of the average length of time that faculty spend in order to sort of demonstrate their mastery of the content. So in sort of day 1 and 2, they're meeting with their manager and their peer coach. They do a live sort of facilitator-led onboarding session, and we onboard our faculty members in cohorts so that there's a group of faculty that are starting at the same time so that they can develop sort of a network and collaboration. And during those first 2 days, they take diagnostic assessment to really gauge sort of their competence with our content, as well as any sort of technology competence as well, because in our model, they need to be comfortable using these multiple platforms. Also then, as a result of sort of that onboarding and the peer coach and the diagnostic assessment, we develop a customized training plan for that faculty member that's completed and sort of defined in conjunction with that faculty member's manager. Then from day 2 to roughly day 20, our faculty members will have daily peer coaching from their peer coach. They're engaged in that sort of personalized training and a pacing plan. They attend live training events to practice and sort of solidify those competencies or skills that we're developing during this period. And then at least weekly, they're meeting with and engaged in live training events with our training team. And it may be more if they're struggling with a particular set of skills during our onboarding, then they will receive more support. So we're sort of modeling our model for our faculty members. And then once they've completed the onboarding, then they take an objective assessment that sort of measures their skills. And then they do a final sort of capstone project, which is a performance assessment. So again, through this sort of competency-based onboarding model, our goal is to not only ensure that they're competent and ready to support students in our model, but we use it as an opportunity to model sort of best practices and how we would expect them to support students or learners in the model once they begin taking students into their load. Are there any questions about that aspect? Okay, so moving into the teachers college aspect of this, the question is, how do we teach teachers to use the mastery-based learning, and how? And, you know, sort of first and foremost, as a teacher candidate, as you're moving through the model, you're engaged weekly in competency-based approach or a mastery-based approach. And so you receive the modeling of that sort of approach from your engagement with our program mentors and our course instructors. Also, when we develop our programs, one of the key inputs into developing a program is what we call a skills map. And the skills map contains all of those skills, which are then later bundled into competencies, but all of the skills that are related to to this particular approach, whether it's differentiated instruction or SEL or whatever that particular skills bundle may be. And then students are, we use that skill map to really try to identify the skills that our teachers will need to be successful in the classroom. And then those are laid across an assessment traverse so that we understand the skills and how we're going to assess them. So it's really the way in which we prepare them is through the modeling and through the skills map and the curriculum that they'll engage with as they're moving through the program. Let's see, are there instructional techniques? So this is the next question. Are there instructional techniques that work well with mastery-based learning? For instance, let's see here. Sorry, I can't quite see it because I'm hidden. There we go. How do teachers manage classrooms of students who are progressing through their learning at different rates? So this is very interesting, and I think a lot of what we're focused on in terms of preparing teachers would be really sort of differentiating the instruction. So how do you support students who may be accelerating through the content in your classroom and those who may take more time? And so, we would be speaking about that within our courses and within our curriculum. And they may see that modeled as well as when they're doing their demonstration teaching, when they're in a classroom. So, our course content really does focus on like, how do you support students maybe moving at different rates as they're moving through the course. And then there's a question about how are teachers taught to use assessment. So we have curriculum that focuses on assessment and being able to properly use that in the classroom. But I think it sort of goes back to when we're developing the curriculum again, we would go back to that skills map and identify what are the skills that are needed to properly utilize assessment in the classroom, and then those would be bundled together, and then we would assess those through our assessment process. So it's built in, it's key to not only their experience, but we also have that need to be able to assess students is built into our skills map. Let's see, are there innovations in teaching or in educating teachers that work well with mastery-based learning and other models? So this is something that's very interesting to us, and we're excited about a new partnership that we have. So one thing we would like to do is be able to, for our teacher candidates, our learners, to have early access and practice with students in classrooms. One way that we're innovating around that is through a partnership with a third party that provides basically artificial intelligence sort of approach. And let me just explain it briefly because it's pretty interesting. So through this partnership, which is just one of the innovations again, a student can practice sort of engaging with a group of 5. That's what's within this model at this time. 5 individual students where you're sitting here, and I would be looking at the screen, and I would see 5 individual students there, and I might perhaps my topic is Shakespeare. I don't know, and I would present my content, and there's an actual actor, a human being who's on the other side, who's playing the persona behind each one of those 5 sort of avatars that I'm looking at. And that actor is skilled at sort of responding or not responding in some cases to the questions I may ask as I'm a teacher sort of in this environment. And there's an individual too who can sort of give feedback after our teacher candidate has engaged in this sort of simulation environment, provide feedback on what that experience was like. Are there opportunities to improve performance? And then students reflect on their experience. And so that's one way in which we're excited to begin to sort of innovate around how to provide access to a class of students, or to engage with students in sort of a simulated way, but get really great sort of substantive feedback about the experience. So that's one way in which we're doing it. Let's see, while working at WGU, has your thinking evolved? I more or less, I think, spoke to this a little bit earlier about how we, as we're serving adult learners, how that has really changed in terms of, again, we're focused on supporting not just the academic needs of the student, but really focused on also providing for the non-cognitive needs, and recognizing that when students come to WGU, there's a lot that they're balancing, whether it's family or full-time jobs, or fear, perhaps fear of failure, perhaps you know, other experiences where they weren't as successful, and just really caring for those needs and supporting students as they're moving through the program.
So we have a couple of minutes left. Does anybody have any questions? Randy Spalding from State Board.
I have a question back on assessment. You talked about how the faculty role is disaggregated, and so when the assessment comes back from the evaluators, is it go back to the program mentor, the course evaluator? How does the communication go back to the students so that they can improve on what they've done and continue to grow?
That's a really great question. So I'm going to really probably oversimplify this, but this is the way I think about it. Is I think of our students are submitting work into our tool, and the evaluators are sitting on this side, and they are picking those tasks up, grading the tasks against the rubric, providing the substantive feedback, and they drop that back into the queue. You know, showing that they've completed their evaluation of the work. That is then released to the course instructor. The course instructor picks that work up and shares that information with the student. And what we've done over the past few years is really increase our expectations around the substantive feedback that the evaluator provides to the student, so that when the course instructor you know, sees the work, and if the student has specific questions, you know, we really try to make that feedback as clear as we possibly can, so that the student sort of knows how to address any concerns. But that the course instructor is there in case the student is confused about particular feedback or whatnot. But when that is submitted back into the queue, then, you know, it's basically released to the course instructor and the student. That's for performance assessments. For objective assessments, which are computer-based assessments, students complete those in a proctored environment. So many of our courses have objective assessments and performance assessments, both in a given course. And through our partnerships with a couple different proctoring companies at this point, our students can actually schedule an objective assessment in real time, take the objective assessment, and then their results are returned to them in their student portal. So with a coaching report that sort of identifies for them the areas for improvement in terms of competencies that they need to address, and that coaching report is shared with a course instructor so that they can, you know, again, sort of either revise or add to an individual plan to support that student.
Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, did you see the question in chat we have from someone asking if we're understanding it correctly that they're using AI to enable teacher candidates to interact with student avatars that are voiced by adult actors?
Yeah, so the particular partnership is with Mersion. And so this is brand new. We will be launching this in July of this year. And so, yes, so yes, it's an adult actor who they are trained by our partner Mersion to be able to provide sort of that interaction from the avatar. So it's not a computer artificial intelligence that's sort of reacting to one of our teacher candidates, and it's an actual human that's sitting behind the avatars. It's really interesting.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you so much. This has been very informative, and I want to thank you and Chancellor Drake, as well as Constance and Jake. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you guys. And of course, our office is always here and available as a resource. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.